Hello once more and welcome aboard Narrowboat Gentian, where at the time of filming it is mid-April and the time has come to move the boat from here down towards the Midlands, a process that is going to take a remarkably long time. Because I can only get to the boat at weekends and not every subsequent weekend, it's going to take about 3 months in total. Today is the first step. We've had glorious sunshine for the last 3 weeks. Today is glorious too. Tomorrow, when I do the main section, it's all set to turn, apparently cloudy. Not hopefully horrible, but just not as nice as today. Nonetheless, today's stage is quite simple. From the marina up to Torksey, lock out, wait on the pontoons below the lock until the first thing tomorrow morning, because the river there is tidal, and then go with the tide in the morning, hopefully as far as Newark.
The engine fired into life and I headed gently off the pontoon and away from Burton Waters Marina. The rev counter, which had been working last time, now reverted to wayward form, showing an entirely unlikely 2,400 RPM. I guess the dodgy wire must have come loose again. A seemingly lone swan passed by. Ahead, the pipe bridge, which last time I said was rather elaborate because of all the metalwork around it, was now fully enclosed by covers, the metalwork having been scaffolding, and the sign on the bank explaining what was going on. It turns out the lone swan wasn't lone at all. He'd clearly just had a row with his partner and needed some space, because here was said partner. It's good for couples to have time to themselves occasionally. Under the pipe bridge, an unusual workboat being marked as electric, unless that's just its name as some sort of joke at modernity. Oh hey look, now the rev counter's showing 1600 RPM, despite me barely changing the speed. It was mid-April and spring had sprung. But goodness me, what's this ahead? A giant swan? No, looks like a sunken boat. I ensured I was over to the right to avoid any part of it catching my hull. That is such a sad sight. And no, that's not my other boat, Twiggy, the restoration of which is still underway. And I'm hoping it doesn't end up like that once I test float it. Before long, I was coming through the village of Saxelby again. And there was more evidence of spring. How did I not show you this last time I came along here? A control tower in someone's garden. I don't know what they're controlling, but I want one. It was a beautiful day. 2.5 hours after I set out, I arrived at Torksey, the visitor moorings a little busier than last time. Ahead was the lock, out from the canal onto the River Trent. You have to book passage with the lockkeeper 2 days in advance, which I had done, so I paused on the lock landing.
Well, I've had a chat with the lockkeeper. He says he's got one boat coming up and I'm to wait for the green light. I'd take myself in and then I will moor on the moorings below.
After another boat came through the other way, I was in, and the lockie eased me through with no problems. Down I went, the boat kept under control by a rope thrown around a bollard on the lock side. You'll be aware of the daily UK tea alarm. Here's a selection of the lockie's teapots stored on the gates. And immediately below the lock are overnight mooring pontoons where I would pause, ready to take the morning tide upriver the next day. In front of me, a colossal Dutch barge, and behind, a narrowboat, all crewed by lovely people who said hello.
It is just the most gorgeous day, having moored up successfully and pleasantly on these pontoon moorings. I'm now going to have tea, cheese sandwich, all the usual stuff, chill for the afternoon, just have a quick look through the guides to going up the Trent again, sleep tonight, and then set off at, I'm kind of aiming for 8:30, but maybe 8:45, that sort of time, to coincide with the tide.
But after lunch, there were useful tasks I could be getting on with.
I have bought a load of these G4 LED light replacements, so while I am parked up this afternoon, I figure I will swap all these bulbs for these ones and have much lower power draw on the battery. That's all the lights done, and they work fine, each one now drawing 1 watt instead of 10 watts, a significant power saving. And it's an afternoon of little DIY jobs because I've just screwed that screw back in that holds the bit of wood that holds the barge pole. It was for some reason out and lying on the metal. It's just triumph after triumph this afternoon. As you can see, I have attached the tunnel light, which is on. And yes, that is a very temporary connection there. I forgot to bring my heat shrink stuff, but at least we've proved it's on. I've turned it round and pointed it upwards, and I did do it by cutting part of this off, and it's all worked splendidly. Good morning. It's about 8:30, Sunday morning. The sun is coming out, which is nice, and in a few moments I'm going to don my life jacket and set off up the River Trent from here, Torksey, to initially Cromwell Lock and then onwards from there to Newark. Cromwell Lock is significant because that's the point where the river stops being tidal and just goes back to being a normal river. Now, because of the tidal nature here, it's all coming in off the Humber estuary, I suppose. I should get a small boost going up because the tide is coming in, and although it's a long way away and you don't get much sense of the tide here, apparently you do get a small boost as you go up, which is why I've picked this time of the morning to go. Should get about 2 hours push, and then from that point onwards you're just pushing against the river as normal. It's 16 miles to Cromwell Lock, so even at 4 miles an hour, that's 4 hours, and depending on how much water is coming down the other way, because I'm going upriver, it could take 5 hours. But then you do get the little boost for the first couple of hours as the water comes in. So I don't really know. People have said anything between 3 and 5 hours, but with my little boat, it's only got a little engine, but then it's only a little lightweight boat. We'll have to just see how it goes. And then once I get through Cromwell Lock, passage through which I have booked, you have to let them know you're coming, then it's onwards to Newark, where there are 2 locks which are self-operated. They're hydraulic and you just put a key in and press buttons, but I have to press the buttons for them, I think, and then I've booked the boat into a marina. Anyway, enough waffling, let's set off. Now, actually, there is something else I ought to mention, which is that I'm slightly anxious about doing this, not only because it's a river and they're wide and deep and, you know, there's more water there than the canals, and it's tidal, obviously, but also I've looked at the charts. I've got 3 different charts for this, and you've never seen so many potential hazards. You've got sandbanks, you've got hidden islands. There's a water skiing zone, although I'm told there shouldn't be any water skiing. There used to be gravel barges. I believe they have stopped running. But it's like someone did a video game of narrowboating and threw in every possible hazard coming towards you could possibly think of. There's lots of soil in the water and stuff, so you have to take the corners on the wrong side, otherwise you'll get grounded. It's just so much to think about. 2 boats coming down the other way yesterday got grounded because they tried to cut the corners, so you have to do everything wrong and take all the corners wide. Calm down, let's have a zen moment and set off.
Carefully, I edged my way out from behind the barge and went along the inlet leading from the lock to the River Trent. To the right was downstream and eventually the Humber estuary, to the left upstream and my destination for today of Newark. I'll do the first couple of corners at 64 times speed to give you the gist of the river. It was largely going to be like this all the way, big sweeping right and left hand bends. The crucial thing the guidebooks want you to remember is that all the inside corners of the curves are very silted up and shallow, so you take them wide, even if that means travelling on the wrong side of the river for a bit. Here I'm on the correct side, the right, and avoiding silt on that corner. And so far all was well. But another type of hazard was just ahead. It's not terribly obvious until you get closer, but in the middle of the river ahead is a tiny island just where that pylon is. Here's a better view, and you can also just make out an obstruction in the water on the right, so the guidebook is emphatic: go left. You don't want to hit that or end up stuck in the shallows. By the way, this is what the guidebook looks like: detailed pages with the optimum line to take marked in red, plus detailed notes of the tricky sections. There's the island as I go past it. And up ahead, just a vast and chilly expanse of river. There's not a lot to see on the banks, but the guidebook does mention every last one, so you have reference points of where you are, such as this holiday caravan park. I kept the radio just inside until I needed it, along with snacks, and yes, those are cheese rolls. An obvious landmark on this corner is Laneham Boat and Ski Club, with luckily no water skiing taking place today, but a very clear slipway and moorings. The weather was not helping my filming, with everything in a black and white silhouette of noir terror. Notice here how I'm doing as the book said, and travelling far over to the wrong side, i.e. the left, so as to avoid the shallow mud bank which has built up on the right hand corner. I'm sure I vaguely recall doing something about this in geography lessons at school. As a teenage swan crossed my path, I could see the Dunham Toll Bridge ahead. This is another section that has a clear warning in the book, as there's a substantial build-up of gravel just underneath the surface in the middle of the river. The book mentions these trees as the point by which you need to get over to the left in order to be safe. They are listed as row of trees. Goodness knows how we'll navigate if they're ever cut down. A sheep watched to see if I'd cope. Not wishing to take any chances, as I approached line of trees, I began to steer the boat to port. By the time I almost got to the bridge, I was so close to the edge I was almost in danger of grounding from going too far that side. Luckily, my boat only has a draft of 1'6", so it could almost float on raindrops. The bridge carries the A57, joining the A1 with Lincoln. Apparently it's a toll bridge with a fee of 50p for cars, £1 for vans and £2 for HGVs and coaches. The second bridge carries a pipe across the river, though what it contains I know not.
Precisely 1 hour has elapsed since I set off, and according to the guides I've done about a quarter of the journey, so it clearly is going to be at least a 4-hour trip up to Cromwell Lock, and then you've got 2 hours after that to get to Newark. I'm a little bit anxious. The marina I'm booked into said do make sure I get there by 4:30 latest, so they have time to check me in, and I've got locks to do. But there's nothing else I can do, just press on and see what time I get there. Worst case is I have to moor in Newark overnight, but that's a nuisance because I really need to be back home tonight for stuff. But que sera, sera, I suppose.
Bizarrely, in the middle of nowhere just after that bridge are these Canal and River Trust moorings for free use. Here's a rather tight bend where again you must avoid the inside line because of silt. If a boat had been coming the other way, I'd have been on their side and would have had to scooch over and hope for the best. Luckily, the river was very quiet. A pole in the water on the next corner marks a shallow bit where there's a line of sandbags sticking out into the water. The guidebook, in its no-nonsense style, refers to these as line of sandbags. It would appear I disturbed them. The viaduct at Fledborough comes into view next, a former river crossing for the railway dating from 1897 and now part of a walking and cycling trail. There are both shallow mud banks on the right but also a large shoal on the left, so you have to steer a path between the two without being able to see either of them. The guidebook says line up between that pylon and the white pole you can just see behind me. Sure enough, I made it to the viaduct without incident. The sheep applauded.
I tell you one thing, I'm very glad I put my jumper on and my fleecy coat. It's freezing, my hands are like icicles, they're all tingling and this is not fun boating. I like sunshine and gin and tonics and just niceness. This is cold boating. I'm not a cold boater. And yes, I am grumbling. I will continue to grumble. Where's the sunshine?
This jetty leads to an industrial unit, but I don't know if they use it for anything. Immediately after is another water skiing club. When a slow narrowboat meets a fast speedboat towing a skier, who gives way to who? Luckily there was no activity, and I was doing well.
1 hour and 45 minutes in, and half the journey to Cromwell Lock done. So picking up the pace a little, which is good.
The sign ending the ski zone was a relief, but it's immediately followed by a large sunken island on this long sweeping left-hand bend. It's enough of a threat that they've put up big signs about it. You're almost halfway past the island when you reach Sluice 29B. The corner felt infinite, but it's not long until the next thing at Grasthorpe Beck, and this wasn't marked on my guide, a rickety scaffolding fence sticking out into the river. Luck or intuition was on my side almost immediately after, as I felt the presence of something coming up behind me. I don't know how I'd sensed this boat approaching, but I looked behind and there it was. With loads of space to overtake, I slowed a little and the cruiser came past with waves both from his hand and the boat's bow. I felt like I was at sea for a moment, bobbing about in that wake. We were both hard over to the left to miss this sandbank. Then over to the other side for this one. Was this a sunken pirate ship underwater? No, I think it was a big log. I gave it a wide berth. At Carlton-on-Trent, marked by this old mill building, I was 2 miles from Cromwell Lock as the crow flies, 3 by the river's route. In fact, the river's practically forming an oxbow here. Now, those I do recall from geography lessons, with a bulbous 180-degree bend in the flow, bringing me past this jetty at Besthorpe. With not long until I reached Cromwell Lock, there was a task I had to do.
Total journey time so far, 3 hours and 40 minutes. I'm about 2 miles away from Cromwell Lock, and I have got my little portable VHF set with me, and I do have a licence to use it, so I'm going to see if I can get the lock keeper up and just tell him where I am so he's ready for me. Now, I say I've got the licence to use it. I did that exam back when I crossed the Wash with Joe and Michael, and how many years ago was that? So whether I can remember the proper sequence for using the marine VHF is anybody's guess, but I only need to say, hello, I'm coming your way, be ready for me, and that'll be about it.
That was duly done. The handheld VHF, which I was using for the first time, worked perfectly, and the Lockie said he was ready for me with the light on green. As I approached, the first sign is of the mighty weir to the side of the lock, and that wasn't the only thing I needed to avoid.
After 4 hours and 10 minutes, I approach Cromwell Lock. All is well with the lock keeper, all is good. I have been warned it's a bit silted up on the approach to the lock, but if I stick to the pontoons, I should be okay.
There's that green light. And in a jiffy I was inside the lock, with the mammoth gates closing behind me. Lock operation here is all taken care of by a keeper, so you just tie the boat onto the risers set into the concrete sides so as to steady the boat while it rises, and you wait for the magic to happen. When the sluice is open, it is a little bit intimidating on a tiny boat. After a pleasant chat with the Lockie, I was on my way to Newark, still on the Trent but now off the tidal section. What a good thing they stop you going over the weir. There are lovely moorings here if you want to stop overnight. I've done so before and it was blissful. The sun was trying to pop its head out, but without much success, and the wide river meant a stiff breeze rushing around me. The boat was working exactly as hoped, chugging away without missing a beat. I put the throttle forward a bit to try to cover the last leg in good time, aware that I'd have to do the 2 locks at Newark myself, with volunteer lockkeepers not due to start the season until the next day. The river was flat calm and it was good cruising. My Nicholson's guidebook says there are public moorings somewhere here, but these aren't them, so where could they be? Well, there are some at the pub, but I can see no sign indicating their usage. Never mind, onwards, Newark beckons. Good grief, that's the second sunken boat on this trip. What an odd place to sink. The sight of the A1 going over the river meant I was nearly at Newark. Just after the bridge, the river forks off around the town with a smaller flow through the centre. Only the latter route is navigable, hence the sign saying all craft straight on. That's the offshoot coming from around Newark. I approached Nether Lock, wondering where the lock landing would be for me to step off and operate the controls. Those are overnight moorings, so I assumed there'd be a lock landing around the corner. Not so. More on that in a minute. By the point you see me here bringing the boat in, I've had a bit of a stressful time, which wasn't improved by me now having to figure out how I was going to tie the boat on a riser while still being able to reach the lock ladders, because the two things are set wide apart in the concrete. I ended up doing a rather dodgy grab for the ladder. This did not improve my mood, but I got there in the end.
Well, I've almost come through Nether Lock. It was quite the palaver because I came round to see if there was a lock landing, because there are moorings and there's actually not a lock landing, there's just some steps to let someone off, but I'm alone on the boat. So I tied the boat to the steps, which was a bit precarious, opened the lock, brought the boat in. Luckily the boat didn't drift off, again, a bit precarious. And then realised that it's quite a deep lock and I wasn't sure my centre line was going to go up to the top. So I tied the centre line to the risers and just had to leave the boat with the centre line tied to the risers. Now that's worked and it's risen, but it's all been a bit nerve-wracking to say the least. But I'm about to exit this lock, then I go through Newark and one more lock and then I get to the marina.
This should have been a relaxing final stretch, but time was ticking on and I still had Town Lock to do. Here are some floating visitor moorings, usually very busy, but not this early in the season it seems. And there's Newark Castle, built 900 years ago. Some more public moorings, a bit harder to access. Through the middle arch at Newark Bridge, as the guidebook advises. There's the castle again. It was largely destroyed in 1646 at the end of the English Civil War. The orange light at the lock means I had to operate it myself. This went a little smoother than the last, but still threw up some snags, I think because I was tired by this point. There's an infuriating public warning message that plays the entire time you're in the lock.
Please keep clear of the lock gate area. Warning, please keep clear of the lock gate area.
Shut up!
Warning, please keep clear of the lock.
And through with just half a mile or so to my destination on the far side of town. There are floodgates to protect part of the town in case of high river levels. Here the river does another little diversion to the bottom of the lock I just came through. At last, after 7.5 hours, Newark Marina lay dead ahead. Very friendly people here, and the boat would stay for the next 3 weeks. Thanks for watching. Cheerio.